All right. Thank you, everyone, for putting your name and your organizational affiliation in the chat. My name is Victoria Shire. I'm with Here to Here, and I'm going to be our MC for today. We have some different perspectives, and we're going to share with you more information about our Braided Pathways Fund RFP. We just want to give another minute or so for folks to join in. And as we're clearing the waiting room, just a reminder again, please put your name and organizational affiliation in the chat. And throughout the presentation, as we cover our information, I also invite you please to put your questions in the chat as well. We'll be scanning the chat and pulling those questions out, looking to address as many of those as we can in the question and answer session later in the presentation, as well as in the FAQ that we posted on our website. So I want to just welcome and again, thank everybody for joining us for today's webinar to learn more about the Braided Pathways Fund RFP, which is designed to support braiding work-based learning into high school and post-secondary students' academic experiences using the key distinguishers for integrated work-based learning. Just some quick FYIs before we begin. The session is being recorded, and we're going to send a follow-up email later this week with the link to the recording, the deck that's being presented. We'll remind you all of where the RFP can be found and the updated FAQ document. And all those materials will also be posted on our website. So don't worry too much about taking screenshots or taking furious notes. We will help to provide that information for you. So as you know, our agenda for today, we're going to go over the RFP in some depth, and we're going to have a question and answer session as well. So we have a fairly packed agenda for our 1 hour together. And in a moment, I'm going to turn the mic over to my Here to Here colleague from his first internship, Brandon Sterling. We're then going to dig into the purpose of the Braided Pathways Fund. We'll walk through the RFP and talk about what makes for a competitive application. And we will dedicate the last 20 to 30 minutes to questions. So again, please get ready and drop those into the chat throughout the meeting. And for any of the questions that we don't get to today, we will address those in our FAQ document by the end of next week. So keep an eye on the FAQ document as we're updating it continuously. So I'm going to turn this over to Brandon to officially kick things off, because Brandon can speak firsthand to the role that work-based learning has played in his life. Brandon has also served as an active member of the Key Distinguishers Task Force, a group of more than 70 practitioners who met between March and May of 2021 of this year to co-develop and pressure test the Key Distinguishers in its first iteration. Also, just, I'm really excited to have Brandon join us today. As I mentioned, Brandon interned with Here to Here, and it was great fun to work with him and learn with and alongside him. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Brandon, to welcome everyone and talk about your experience with work-based learning. I see Brandon's just joining us, so we'll just give him a second to get himself settled. Maybe we may, Brandon, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Sorry about being late.
No, you're good. You're right where you need to be. So we'd love to hear from you about your experience with work-based learning and why you're excited about making those opportunities available for all students across the city.
Yes, thank you, Victoria. So I wrote down a couple words. So first off, I would like to thank everybody for joining and for their commitment providing high quality work-based learning opportunities for people everywhere. Throughout the year 2020, I was introduced to work-based learning and braided pathways from Here to Here. From my experience, it has impacted me in a way I didn't realize until a couple of years after what it actually did to me. During my senior year of high school, I was offered an internship to work at Here to Here, and it changed the way I looked at jobs after high school. It prepared me to be in a professional work environment, and it added crucial experiences and skills to my resume, which helped me acquire jobs after I left here. And that would be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. Appreciate you spending some time with us today. I know that your student schedule has been busy. So, and college is going well? College is going well?
Yes, college is going well. Starting my sophomore season in August.
Outstanding.
Sophomore semester. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
All right.
So I am now going to turn, I'm going to introduce and turn over the mic to my colleague, Poorv. Poorv, many of you know, has been leading our impact and evaluation work at Here to Here and has been convening and leading our Key Distinguishers Task Force over the last many months. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Poorv.
Thank you, Victoria. And thank you, Brandon, for that introduction. And thank you all for being here. So yeah, I'm going to try to, sort of fly through somewhat quickly, just a little bit of sort of background and context, some of which, many of you are already familiar with. And I do want to sort of make sure I'm leaving plenty of time when I turn it over to Ali to dig a little bit deeper into the RFP, and then of course leave plenty of time for questions as well. So I'll go ahead and give some preemptive apologies for talking quickly, but as was mentioned before, all this will all be on the website. It's being recorded, etc. So just really quickly for I know many of you are familiar with Here to Here, but for those who are perhaps a little less familiar with Here to Here. We are an intermediary organization. We're located in the South Bronx. And our goal really is to ensure that every student from the Bronx and really every student in New York City is able to launch into a family-sustaining career by the time they're 25 years old. And we really believe that the way to get there and the way to get to an equitable and inclusive and thriving economy that would sort of allow for that to happen and make sure that our young people are really fulfilling their potential is that we really have to integrate or braid work and learning from work into traditional academic pathways. And really the purpose of the Braided Pathways Fund is to support a growing commitment on the part of many stakeholders that we've sort of witnessed and brought together, that commitment to braiding work-based learning into high school and post-secondary students' academic experiences, and using the key distinguishers, which is really sort of a framework for how to do that effectively and at a high level of quality and in ways that are scalable. And I'll talk a little bit more about the key distinguishers here in a minute. So here, this graphic, really sort of demonstrates, I think effectively sort of what we mean when we talk about braiding learning from work into academics. We really sort of feel like together that we have a real opportunity, particularly in this present moment with, the stimulus money that's coming from the federal level, with the new administration that'll be set to take over, the new mayoral administration that we'll be having soon. We have a real opportunity to sort of transform our youth talent development system into one that really elevates student career success and braids work into every young person's academic pathway. And that's really sort of what this diagram is sort of alluding to, this idea that educational institutions, employers who we feel like are, really need to be a really big, big part of that system, along with sort of a system infrastructure that really sort of facilitates career awareness and exploration and experience for young people, CBOs, playing a major role as well in terms of some of the partnerships that are necessary to sort of keep that infrastructure sort of in place. And you can see here on this diagram some of the milestones that we really feel like young people need to be hitting, or things that need to be experiencing from as early as 9th grade and really through sort of what we really feel like is lifelong learning for ultimate sort of career success. So really sort of the Braided Pathways Fund, which we've had support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Deutsche Bank Americas Foundation, is really sort of allowing us to make this investment through this RFP of about $500,000 in New York City-based public high schools, CUNY institutions and programs, and CBOs that partner with public high schools or CUNY institutions that are really committed to braiding work-based learning into high school and post-secondary students' academic experiences, using the key distinguishers as a guide for really sort of how to develop those braided pathways effectively, and to really sort of ultimately achieve that equitable talent development system and strategy that we know is central to a thriving and inclusive economy. So, one sort of, kind of analog for what we're sort of, doing with the key distinguishers in sort of the youth talent development space is something that perhaps some of you have heard from our CEO, Abby Jo Siegel, is the green communities criteria, right? So in the affordable housing space, and really sort of in the housing space in general, back in the 90s, you would talk about green buildings, and you would sort of say, what, is that just a building that's, painted green or what have you? And it really was because of the practitioners that sort of came together and created this practitioner-driven criteria that really allowed there to be a set of criteria that really said, okay, if you meet these criteria, you have a green, in obviously meaning sort of, energy efficient and environmentally sort of friendly development. And with the field coming together, to really sort of create the momentum for change, leverage private and public funds for investments in green developments and for capacity building. And so now that this criteria, this very sort of well-defined practitioner-driven criteria for what constitutes a green building is really now sort of built into public funding mechanisms and into a research framework for practitioners in the field, so that even folks, like myself, who have, really no experience in affordable housing or the housing space, I know exactly what, or not exactly, but I know pretty well what it means to be a green building. And I know very well that it's not just that a building is painted green. So that's sort of similar to what we're sort of trying to achieve with the key distinguishers is, again, bringing the field together around this set of criteria so that we can all sort of come to a collective definition of what really sort of constitutes high quality work-based learning and how that can drive a youth talent development system that works for all young people in the city. So similar to the way that stakeholders came together for with green communities to create that criteria, we launched a Key Distinguishers Task Force back in March. We had input, the participation of over 70 practitioners, educators, students, employers, folks from CBOs, a whole range of stakeholders. We met multiple times between March and May of this year to really sort of pressure test, co-develop, and refine the criteria that really sort of allowed us to go from an initial draft, sort of a 1.0 of the key distinguishers to our next iteration, which also includes a great number of examples from the field of how folks are actually utilizing the key distinguishers in their work, today, and how they can sort of go about doing that work, what some of the opportunities are, what some of the challenges are that they've had to sort of overcome to do that work. And it was really sort of an incredible sort of gathering of folks to really sort of help move this work forward. So we're now sort of in our sort of next steps of moving the work of the task force forward. And just like with the green communities, really sort of to create and really move forward this practitioner-driven criteria and the tools for scaling high-quality work-based learning opportunities that ensure that young people are set up for career success. So this is sort of a diagram is kind of showing how we sort of envision kind of ultimately getting to that place on the far right, where we have this equitable youth talent development system in place, where we've first defined and refined the key distinguishers. We've developed practitioner resources. Folks are adopting, we're iterating and advocating for the policies that would allow these key distinguishers to be used in a more widespread way. And eventually we reach sort of a tipping point where this just sort of just becomes the way that this work is engaged in, because it's being proven to work and folks have the resources and the research is driving us sort of in that direction. And this is just a little bit more sort of a detailed sort of look at sort of that roadmap of sort of starting from the left, where we sort of start out by defining these criteria and ultimately getting to the right, where we have that youth talent development system. In the interest of time, I won't go through all the specifics, but again, you all can look back at this presentation after today and read into this in a little bit more detail. So I just, in the interest of time, I've sort of moved pretty quickly and perhaps skipped over an item or two, but I want to go ahead and pass it to Ali Margolis, who's going to really sort of walk us through the Braided Pathways Fund and the RFP and really sort of the purpose of this work and really sort of, I think, get into what I think you all are probably here for, which is to really sort of dig into the RFP and what we're sort of looking for in the applications. So Ali, with that, I'll toss it to you.
Great, thanks, Poorv. Hello, everyone. My name is Ali Margolis. I'm the project director on the policy and impact team with Here to Here. And yeah, thanks, Poorv, for kicking us off with that. Thank you, Brandon, so much for that wonderful welcome, and Victoria. And thanks so much to the 134 folks who are joining us today. So I'm going to just reshare a few links in the chat that might be helpful for you to reference as I go through some of this material. And again, just if you have questions, as I'm sort of going through this, please drop them in the chat as your questions pop up. That way, when we get to the Q&A section directly after this, we will be, just ready to kick off. So as Poorv explained, the purpose of this RFP is really to support New York City-based public high schools, CUNY institutions, and community-based organizations who partner with high schools or CUNY institutions that are committed to braiding work-based learning into students' academic pathways and experiences using the key distinguishers. And just to clarify and get us all on the same page, when we say work-based learning, we're referring to like a category of academic learning models that embed real-world experiences of work into educational experiences and into academic experiences, such as internships, apprenticeships, and other experiences that connect education to the world of work. And as you'll see on the first 2 pages of the RFP, and again, the link is in the chat, awards are going to be bucketed into 2 different categories. So I'm going to take a moment to go over those 2 categories, distinguish the differences between the 2 and what each entails. And again, you'll see that right on the RFP. And the first category is highlighting exemplary practices. So when we say highlight exemplary practices, we're referring to New York City public high schools, CUNY institutions, and CBOs that exemplify the key distinguishers in action. The existing program should highlight an exemplary practice or practices that braid learning from work into academics and into academic pathways using the key distinguishers, and doing that in a way that could really serve as a model for the field. Also, when we say exemplary practice, we're referring to those models, to those practices, to those approaches that other people can follow. Something that your school or institution or program is already doing and doing really well that others can learn from. So lifting up what's working through case studies, through a peer learning community, and in other ways, because that is, really critical to supporting the fields with high quality work-based learning that, as Poorv shared in the roadmap, can be scaled. And we're, if you might be thinking like, what is an exemplary practice of putting the key distinguishers into action actually mean? Where do I go to define that? You'll find that in the appendix section of the key distinguishers. And again, that link is right in the chat, and we'll just kind of keep sharing it throughout the session. But the key distinguishers document really includes several examples of what each key distinguisher looks like in actions across settings. And so particularly around question 2 of the application, and I'll kind of walk through that in a moment. That's a really helpful place where you can use that appendix as a guide for like how to frame your response to question 2. So that's a little bit about highlighting exemplary practices. In terms of integrating new design or redesign, that's second bucket of the scope of work for this RFP. This we're referring to New York City public high schools, CUNY institutions, or CBOs that are partnering with either a high school or a CUNY institution who are newly designing or redesigning their work-based learning initiatives, or maybe a particular aspect of their program in alignment with the KDs. And sorry, when I say KDs, I'm referring to key distinguishers. And this can include redesigning or expanding an existing program to now include the key distinguishers in order to insert quality into your program. It can also include the key distinguishers in an entirely new program as a guide for what work-based learning can look like in your new effort. And if on the other hand, let's say like you're picking up something that you've already been doing, maybe you've already been using the key distinguishers in your 11th and 12th grade work-based learning curriculum, and now you kind of want to plug and play that into your 9th grade work-based learning curriculum, that scope of work would fall under the first bucket that I described, highlighting exemplary practice. So if that's sort of the project that you have in mind, we'd recommend applying for the highlighting exemplary practice scope of the grant. Whereas integrating new design, that's more something new that you're doing or trying using the key distinguishers. And with both of these scopes of work, we're looking for examples where work-based learning is really embedded or planned to be embedded into the school, the institutional design, and into sort of the holistic structure of the school day and experience. And you'll really see that reflected on page 5 of the RFP in the evaluation criteria. We say it right there, 80% of the score is of each application is based on this description of how you are already or how you plan to use the key distinguishers. The other 10% is on, how what you're doing can inform the field. And then the remaining 10% is on your capacity to really do this work. So with that, I'm gonna sort of switch gears and move on to eligibility. But again, if you have questions on those 2 buckets, just drop them in the chat as we go. So in terms of eligibility, it's pretty straightforward. It's right on the RFP, but a few clarifying points because we had some good questions roll in from community-based organizations. So I'll kind of address those. And they are also on the FAQ, so no need to memorize. When we say CBOs, we're referring to community-based organizations, and not just a nonprofit with a 501(c) status, but one that is place-based with relationships in the local community, that's really working on the ground in community-specific ways. And for CBOs that apply, we're looking for strong CBO partnerships with New York City public high schools and/or CUNY institutions. And when we say strong CBO partnerships with schools or institutions, we really mean that the CBO and a specific school or set of schools or CUNY institutions have formal documented partnerships as opposed to, like one-off sort of programs or services that a school can kind of take or leave or push in. So that's a little bit about what we mean there. And in terms of competitive CBO applications, we're really looking for an explanation of how your work-based learning program is embedded into the partner school's academic pathways and is advancing the school or the CUNY program design or redesign or the practices that school or institution is already using that are embracing or that they plan to use to embrace work-based learning. Again, a competitive application, just want to really drill that down, shows the ways that the school or the schools are connecting to the CBO services and sort of like applying them throughout that school culture and academic pathways. So again, if you have questions, just drop those in the chat. I'm going to move on a bit though now to grant activities. So, what does it mean to get this award? What are you signing up for? The funding is designed to support grantees' time and participation in completing three key activities. And those are 1, the baseline assessment, 2, documentation of lessons learned and best practices, and 3, the peer learning community. So grantees will use the key distinguishers in terms of the baseline. Let me back up a minute. In terms of the baseline self-assessment, that's that first activity. Grantees will use the key distinguishers to self-assess where your program currently embraces best practices in work-based learning through the key distinguishers, and where you can really go deeper in using the key distinguishers to most effectively braid learning from work into academic pathways. And we're going to support you through that process. So that support from us will look like thought partnership, self-assessment tools, access to best practices, technical assistance, and kind of anything else that arises that grantees need. That second activity around documentation of lessons learned and best practices, grantees will also be responsible for developing a case study or informing a stakeholder-specific playbook, and or possibly other documentation to really highlight and to codify exemplary practices so we can lift those up, transferable approaches, challenges, other learnings that surface throughout the course of the grant. And in terms of what that means for the grantee, part of that's going to look like organizing your staff, students, other stakeholders to participate in documentation related activities, which can include interviews, surveys, data collection, other steps that might be necessary to produce a case study. And again, we're going to support throughout that process in producing the case study, providing resources that are necessary to support with that, and of course, elevating those findings across the field. In terms of the peer learning community, that's that third activities that grantees are a part of, and that's really engagement and participation in the peer learning community to share challenges, opportunities, other learnings with other grantees, and to offer, and receive technical assistance from one another around problem solving. And we're going to, in terms of how Here to Here will help and support with that, we're going to design the agendas, schedule those things, host peer learning opportunities, and of course, other opportunities that are maybe broader than this peer learning community to share the findings and share just helpful insights field-wide. So that's a little bit about the three activities. I'm going to move on to funding, but again, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat. So as the Poorv shared, awards of up to $50,000 each are projected to run from September 2021 through August 2022. And those are intended to support those three outcomes that I just shared: the baseline, the case studies, and peer learning, the peer learning community, as well as the costs that are associated with implementing, designing, or embedding braided pathways and work-based learning experiences that align with the key distinguishers. In terms of, we've gotten a few questions around like, when can these funds be utilized? They should be expended in the grant's period of performance, which again is September 2021 through August 2022. Funds may be passed through the Fund for Public Schools, the Research Foundation, CUNY, or other partnerships. And in terms of how the grants will be dispersed, they're expected to be paid in 2 equal installments, one in the fall of 2021 and one in the summer of 2022. And I'll talk a little bit more about that when I go over question 3 of the application. So just stay tuned, but if questions come up, of course, pop them in the chat. And in terms of the timeline, applications are due on August 13th. So just, second week of August or so by 5 p.m. I think that slide should share a little bit, or the next slide should actually share a little bit about how to submit an application. And this just gives an overview. Just make sure you refer to the full RFP for that whole set of instructions there. And decisions will be announced in September. So with that, I'm gonna just sort of quickly move on and discuss what the qualities of a competitive application look like. And I'm gonna kind of go through that by referencing each question. So each application question. So if it's helpful for you to have that RFP up, then maybe put that up. And if you wouldn't mind just sharing that RFP in the chat again, that'd be great. So question 1 of the RFP, and you'll also see it on the slide, describe your work-based learning programming and approach. For both the exemplary practice and the new design or redesign grants, we're looking for a response here where work-based learning programming and approaches that are really like in a compelling way, describing the structure, the practices, or the institutional culture in place or plan to be in place to effectively braid work and learning. And the strongest applications are really going to show how work-based learning is or will be embedded into these experiences that are happening in the school or in the CUNY institution, and how these experiences are being integrated into school culture. And again, just as a reminder for CBOs, it's important to really explain how the work-based learning program is embedded into the partner school's academic pathways and is advancing school or CUNY program design or redesign, or the practices to embrace work-based learning. In terms of the second question on the RFP, describing how your program or program practices align with and exemplify the key distinguishers, for both categories or scopes of work with this grant, the exemplary practice piece and the new design or redesign piece, we're looking for a compelling description of how your current or your proposed program braids work and learning in alignment with specific key distinguishers. So really share how your program is either already putting or is planning to put specific key distinguishers into action. And just a reminder, look at the appendix section of the key distinguishers. That's going to be really helpful with sort of crafting your response. And you could use a similar paragraph style to what you see in our appendix section of the key distinguishers in those examples. And I see some questions are rolling in. So yeah, we're just so you know, we're not ignoring those. We're kind of taking tabs of those, and we'll get to those in the Q&A. So keep them coming. Question 3, describe how funds from the grant will be used to support your efforts to braid work-based learning into students' academic experiences using the key distinguishers and to accomplish the goals of the grant. Here, we really want to know how you'll use this funding to incorporate and embrace the key distinguishers in your programming in a way that impacts program quality, in a way that can provide lessons for others across the field, can contribute to the learnings of other grantees in the peer learning community, and achieves the outcomes of the grant. Now, we are getting a lot of questions, or received several questions before this webinar the past few days about like how funding can be used. Can it be used for student stipends? Can it be used for other costs associated with implementing your program? The short answer is yes. So long as you are able to clearly and compellingly explain how your use of funds will connect to the outcomes of the grant or the costs that are associated with implementing, designing, or embedding work-based learning that aligns with the key distinguishers. So for some, such as maybe the DOE, CUNY, public charter schools, funds may need to flow through public systems like the Fund for Public Schools or the Research Foundation of CUNY or other partnerships, in which case we will work with you to ensure that the use of funds is given maximum flexibility. But again, that is just something to note there. And again, as you'll see in the RFP, specifically on page 5, section 9, under that evaluation criteria, 80% of the application evaluation is based on how the applicant is or plans to utilize the key distinguishers, either through documenting existing exemplary practice or through implementing the key distinguishers in the design of a new or redesigned program. So competitive applications will clearly connect your use of funds to the grant outcomes or to the costs that are associated with that work. That's a little bit about question 4. Or question 3, excuse me. Question 4, what can other practitioners across the field learn from your practices of braiding, learning from work into academic pathways, or your approach to newly designing or redesigning programming? Whether you're looking for funding to elevate exemplary practices in your existing programs or through the design or redesign of a new program, there will likely be important takeaways and lessons for others in the field. So a major outcome of this grant, again, is like just documentation of and elevating best practices and lessons learned. So we really want to know what lessons you think should be lifted up through your work and will be most helpful for others engaging in this work or interested in engaging in the KDs to really have a framework for high quality work-based learning in their settings. And then the last question on the RFP is around your program or your organization's capacity to design or redesign programming in alignment with the key distinguishers and to be engaged in core activities of the grant. So this question is quite straightforward, but it is important that you're clear on like what the responsibilities and the activities of the grants are and that you have the capacity to meet those. And so a competitive application is really going to make clear the school, organization, or institution's capacity to support work-based learning in a way that is embedded throughout the school culture, throughout academic pathways. So that was a lot of information. So keep the questions coming, and we will have a recording of this, and we will post that on our website and send it in a follow-up email. We will also have the slide deck available, so no need to memorize everything. But with that, I will turn it over to Victoria to moderate our Q&A. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Allie. You did a great job. I am now going to pull out my auctioneer skills, and I am going to answer some of the questions that have already appeared in the chat, and at the same time, keep an eye on the questions that keep rolling in. So a couple of questions that have already come in, I'm kind of grouping together. A couple of questions here about our priorities for organizations that serve youth in the Bronx. Some organizations that serve youth across all 5 boroughs may have a majority of students from the Bronx or some students from the Bronx. And then a related question around the preference in the RFP for awards going to Bronx-based organizations. So an overview on some answers there. We are interested in exemplary practice and expansion of work-based learning that aligns to the key distinguishers that may be taking place across the city. So there's not a requirement of serving Bronx students or being in Bronx-based schools or CUNY institutions. However, as a Bronx-based organization, Here to Here intends to make at least half of our awards to Bronx-based organizations. And for us, Bronx-based means that the school is based in the Bronx or the majority of students at that school are Bronx students. So we're going to ask you to tell us in the application approximately how many students from the Bronx would be served by the work-based learning program that you're proposing, either to highlight exemplary practice within or to expand or develop. There are also a number of questions asking us to clarify about the CBO relationship to schools, to multiple schools, or what partnerships look like. So a couple of questions that came in around that. More information about CBOs who have multiple school partners. So we recognize that many CBOs out there, you're all doing incredible work across the city. And in this case, it's helpful to remember that what we're looking for is change at the school level. So the extent to which a school has committed to utilizing the key distinguishers as its framework for embedding work-based learning into academics at that school, the extent to which that school is using the key distinguishers to change its culture and to braid work-based learning and academics together. And so if you're a CBO who's working with multiple schools, we would ask you in the application, one, to really be thinking about, is there a school that is ready to commit to using the key distinguishers alongside the program that you may provide with them at that school? That'll be really important. So demonstrating that the school is committed. And you don't need, in this case, to say, look, we work with 15 schools. You might say, this is the one school that we're going to go deep with on the key distinguishers. We do want you to show us that that school is also committed. So there's some questions about, is it best for a CBO and a school to submit together or just have the school submit? Because the work might only be happening at one school. And our answer to that is that, as I was saying before, if a CBO is the lead partner, you want to name the school specifically that you're proposing to work with. It could be more than one school, but really think about, it's not necessary to say, look, it's 15 schools. You could say, we're going to work with this one school around this work in the 2021-22 school year, because we're going to really make sure that the key distinguishers are being used around work-based learning at that school. And then that becomes a model for the other schools that we work with. That would be completely fine. It's also fine for the school themselves to apply. We wanted to leave that open because in some cases, there may be reasons why where the work-based learning is happening might reside currently more strongly within the school or with their CBO partner who's working closely with the school. And then there's a question about CBOs being eligible for more than one grant. And so in this case, our unit is the school. So we're looking at, again, change that we can see in the school culture at the school. If you're working with multiple schools, I would say reach out to us so that we can, to the RFP at heretohere.org email address, and maybe give us 3 sentences, no more, about what you have in mind, and we'll see if we can give you some specific information. In general, our awards are going up to $50,000, and it is, but that's not $50,000 per school. Let's see, what else came in? There's a question about CUNY institutions. So a CUNY institution can apply directly, does not need to partner with another CBO or with a high school. So CUNY institutions can apply as their own application, highlighting how they're going to braid work-based learning or key distinguishers into a specific program in a CUNY school or within a CUNY school overall. Let's see here. Questions, and Ali addressed this a little bit. Funds can be used to pay student stipends. Yes, that includes student intern wages. Do we need to submit a budget? There is a question in the application where we ask you to tell us about how you would propose to use the funds awarded in this grant to support the activities. And that's an opportunity for you to tell us how you're planning to use your funds. We may come back in some cases and ask for some additional information just so that we're clear about what you're proposing. And grantees who are selected will be asked to share information about how work-based learning is funded at that particular school so that we can understand more about where our assistance and support can help change what's possible at that school. And I would also add that that we're looking for evidence, as I've said several times, we're looking for evidence of school commitment. One of the ways that you can show that you are the school partner you're working with, if you're a CBO or you as a school are committed to work-based learning, is to tell us a little bit in your application about how work-based learning is funded at your school. So there's a thought there. Let's see, what else? Let me scroll up to where I last left off. Oh, there was a question about academic experiences. Do they include school hours or after school programming? We are looking, our priority is for work-based learning that's integrated into the school day academic experiences. As you'll see in the key distinguishers, one of the things that the key distinguishers calls out, that what exemplary integration looks like, is that students are receiving credit for their work-based learning experiences. There's a question in here, there are a couple of questions about about different degree programs. So a question about CBOs who work with other organizations that focus on GED or high school equivalency preparation. So Here to Here is focused on braiding work-based learning into academics, and successful applications may include, for example, CDOS or other degree pathways. Applicants must have a school partner. And I would say that for the folks who, if you're particularly interested in whether it's a good fit for GED or high school equivalency preparation, just reach out to us more specifically in the RFP at heretohere.org email so that we can talk a little bit more about what you're looking for there. There's a similar question in the chat as well about CTE schools. And I think Ali did a great job talking about what the difference between highlighting exemplary practice, that is something that's already happening in your school or in your program and school partnership, that you say, we want to be the case study for this aspect of the key distinguishers. We're already doing it. We want the world to know. That's highlighting exemplary practice. The new and expanded programming is, we're about to do something more or different or new with work-based learning at our school, and we want to use the key distinguishers as our guide for what quality looks like as we do that. That's sort of the difference between the new and existing programs. And again, if you have very specific questions to your program, feel free to reach out to us. There's a question about circulating a list of the participants for this conference. If you're looking for a partner, reach out to us at rfp@heretohere.org with a little bit of information about what you bring to the table and what kind of a partner you're looking for, and we'd be happy to just make a couple of suggestions of who you might want to reach out to. I would say that if you may be starting a little bit, we're expecting a lot of applications. We're thrilled with the interest in this RFP, and so we're expecting a lot of applications. And if you do not have a current partner, what you might want to do is start that partnership in anticipation of a future round, which we are hopeful we will be able to offer. Let's see what else we have here. There's a question about parochial schools. We are looking for New York City public and public charter schools as our eligible high school partners for this application. Let's see. If you have a school has a lot of small partnerships instead of one core partner, is that okay? Absolutely, that's okay. I'm glad to hear you have lots of partners. What we would ask you to do in your application is really take the point of view of how are you as a school looking to, again, either highlight practice that you already have in place at your school that exemplifies the key distinguishers, or you as a school are looking to expand or try something new to integrate and embed work-based learning into your academic program at your high school. You can talk about what aspects of the key distinguishers are attractive to you that you'd like to try out new, or what you're already doing if you're applying under the existing exemplary practice component. And you can describe the partners that you are currently working with. It does not have to be one high school only has one CBO partner. I hope that's helpful. Can a college partner with a manufacturing company, or does there have to be a CBO? If a CUNY institution says, this is what we're doing, wants to say, this is what we're currently doing, or this is what we would like to do, and in order to take that next step, or as part of what we're doing awesomely already, we are partnering with this manufacturing company, that's a fantastic partnership. We would ask in that case that the lead applicant be the CUNY institution and not the employer partner. The last question.
Victoria, you mind if I jump in real quick?
Yes, please do.
Just to sort of, kind of underscore that point, just in case there's some confusion. So a CBO has to have an educational institution, a public high school or CUNY institution program as a partner. A high school or CUNY program does not have to have a CBO as a partner in order to apply. Now, partnerships are one of the key distinguishers. It is certainly something that we would be sort of looking for in an application if those partnerships exist. But for a high school or a CUNY institution / program, it doesn't have to be a CBO partner. It can very well be an employer partner, as in the case that was mentioned with the manufacturing company. And yes, and as I mentioned, those types of employer partnerships would certainly very much strengthen an application. So we certainly would love to see those. But so a CBO has to have a school partner. The schools do not have to have a CBO partner. So just wanted to clarify that.
That's an excellent clarification, Poorv. Thank you. Christina, I'm sorry you have to jump off, but this recording will be made available on the website, and we'll send out an email as soon as it's available, so you won't miss the last 10 minutes when we all do our synchronized dancing and cheers. You can chime in, catch up on that later. I think, let's see, there's a question in here that I haven't addressed yet. Yes, how many grants will be approved or extended? That is a great question. We are confident we're going to receive just some amazing applications because you're all doing incredible work. And so we will be receiving applications and scoring them. And then we are going to try to go as deep into that scored list as we can, which means, not every grant is going to be up to $50,000. Some grants may be sized differently. Our review committee, which is made up of stakeholders from high schools, from CUNY, from the Department of Education, from Bronx-based organizations and students, that review committee will be informing the decision around the size of the grants. So the short answer is at least 10 grants, I believe, will be approved, and it could be hopefully more than that. CBOs who may have the same school as partners, is it okay for schools to be written into more than one application? I believe yes. Again, we will be looking for the unit of change to be happening at the school. So if a school is going to partner with more than one CBO, we're going to be really interested in understanding how those different partnerships are adding meaningfully advanced components to the school's adoption and embedding of work-based learning into academics and the school culture. If you're asking that question as a school, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to sort of talk about what you might have in mind. If you're asking that question as a CBO, my suggestion would be to have a conversation with your school partner. They need to be aware of and part of the application that you're developing. And you might want to ask them if they're having similar conversations with other CBOs. It is not necessarily more advantageous for a school to say, yes, we are doing this with five CBOs, and so we're going to get 5X grants. It may not turn out that way. So yeah, please chime in.
I'll jump in on that one. We'll also be looking at the portfolio of grants as a portfolio. So we're not going to want all the grants to go to one school. So that will be part of the balance to make sure we're getting good representation of high schools and CUNY and sort of across the city types of schools, types of programs. So.
Yeah, that's an excellent clarification. Thank you, Abby. I think that I've addressed all of the questions that have come up so far in the chat. If you put a question in the chat and I didn't answer it, we have 2 minutes that you could, that I could still try to answer it. Please continue to send your questions to rfp@heretohere.org. We are answering all of those emails within 24 hours. And honestly, there's no question that you could ask that will surprise, shock, or dismay us. We actually find that your questions help us to sharpen our thinking and be clearer in what we're looking for. There's one question that just popped in, and I will answer this one before I turn it over to Abby. If we apply, see, now you're all just dropping more questions in. If we apply for 50,000, could we still be awarded a smaller award, or is it all or nothing based on the proposed amount? It is definitely not all or nothing. Smaller awards are totally possible. It's not all or nothing. Question about indirect costs be included in the budget. We invite you in the question about your proposed use of funds to tell us how you might spend this grant. And so your answer might be something like, funds from this award will allow us to assign a work-based learning coordinator within the school. Or your answer could be our funds from, and not or, and to support intern wages for this portion of the school year as those students are engaged in work-based learning and academic credit. And we will be documenting how all of that works in our work, through these grant activities. Or your answer might be something like, the funds from this grant are going to support per session staff at our school who are going to engage in planning the next iteration of our work-based learning project. And this is the kind of stuff they're going to work on. And also we are going to hire a consultant. So you don't need to distinguish between it's this much direct labor, it's this much indirect, it's this much, we're not going to ask you for a line item budget, but we would like you to describe in the fullest way possible, where you plan to direct the funds. And there is, do you have CBOs that are looking for schools to partner with? We might, if you're a school who's really interested in the key distinguishers and you're not sure where to start, send us an email at RFP at heretohere.org so that we can get to know you as a school, and we may be able to introduce you to some partners and help you think about a way to enter into this work. If you are a school, if you're a CBO that you think you have something really, really valuable to offer, in terms of work-based learning, and you just haven't found that right school partner yet, yeah, reach out to us there as well. And it's one of our roles at Here to Here as an intermediary is to help broker partnerships and introduce folks to each other. It's one of our favorite things to do, I promise. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Abby Jo Siegel, to just kind of give us some closing thoughts. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you all. Oops, we're getting sorry. It's great to see everyone. Many faces that I know well and names I know well. Many folks who really helped to contribute to developing the key distinguishers. So hopefully it's familiar and it's really representative of your work and your past work, and also what you're aspiring to do in partnership with DOE schools and CUNY, or if you're the schools themselves. Additionally, it's been great to see a bunch of new faces. So as Victoria underscored, we are here to answer questions, to help deepen your understanding. We are also very familiar with being on the other side of RFPs and know the challenges and know that the questions come at various times and various hours. So again, please don't hesitate to send it to us. We want them to make this sort of straightforward and easy, and just really hold up all of the great work that's being done in the field to make the case for why we really need to have work-based learning at the front and center of our educational institutions if we really want to successfully launch our young people into family-sustaining careers and choice-filled lives. So I really just want to say thank you for your time today, but more importantly, thank you for all the time you put into this so we could even do this RFP. So appreciate you all. We're here, don't be shy.